Oh my. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Zyori podcast. It is beautiful August 27th, 2017, 9:30 a.m. here Mountain Time, and this is a special podcast indeed. Today, we will be talking a little about Dota and esports related topics. Today, we're going to be tackling the big stuff. We've done a couple of these Zyori podcasts with the philosophy major, my buddy here, Dylan Matusek. He's joining us remotely from New Jersey. We've done two of these on the old Zyori channel. Now we've moved to Moonduck. This might be a new face for some of you moon fuckers out there, but this is a good one. He's I don't even know the right introduction. He's got a degree in philosophy, so we call him the philosophy major. He doesn't even have a Twitter handle. I see he's got a Twitch chat handle. We modded him. What I like about you, Dylan, is that you actually talk to Twitch chat like they're people. You know, you're looking for that civilized conversation.
People. I'm all about civilized conversation. As I think that's one of the topics I want to get into. Is I'm absolutely all about civilized conversation.
Well, for sure. We're definitely going to be talking a lot about the recent free speech issues, the kind of unite the right stuff. Trent and I didn't really talk about it in the last podcast. We touched on it. You know, we got a little tangential. I vented a little bit. Did you go back and listen to my clip from the last one?
I listened to some of it, and so you sent me another cool one, which was Alex Jones talking to Milanokis.
Oh God! Yeah.
And I was listening to some of that, and I was pretty happy that they were having a civilized dialogue. I'm just happy whenever I see people having civilized dialogue, even if it's people like Milo, who I think are generally kind of inflammatory.
Yeah. I stumbled upon that guy 4 days ago, I think. The Milo interviews Alex Jones. It's like an hour and 10 minutes. It's shortly after the Megyn Kelly interview that I think Milo was calling it the interview that Megyn Kelly should have done. It's not that great. It really is just the two dudes kind of talking about how hard their lives are and how awesome the other one is. You know, there's a lot of circle jerking, but there are a couple good nuggets in it, right?
Listen though, because a lot of the times they talk I can't speak for Alex Jones because I don't really listen to him that much, but a lot of times Milo talks, it's not like that at all. It's just a bunch of it's ideologue stuff, you know. He's an ideologue, so he wants to get his opinions out there, which he has every right to do. Mm-hmm. But this was different because it wasn't like so flamey. They were just appreciating each other, and they were just talking about phenomena in their life, which was rare. You know, like you rarely humanize these guys.
Right.
So to have them have a human face and talk about eating tacos and bullshit like that is kind of
it's interesting
refreshing.
You bring that up though, because this last international, right? I don't even know if you're aware, but TI7 just happened, our big $25 million Super Bowl, big grand event for the year. And this year they did a much better job kind of humanizing the players, and they forced them to do loser or like elimination interviews this time. So a team gets eliminated from the main event, and then like 5 minutes later they have to do an interview and, for a couple of minutes talk about just, how they're feeling and that kind of shit. And it was sort of controversial because obviously it's hard to watch and some of them weren't really that great, and it's a really hard job for the interviewer, and it hits you in the feels, man. It makes you feel emotional. So it's reasonable that it's like that movie Up. It's hard to watch that movie and not for a moment be like, oh man, it's gonna suck to be old and alone. And just want to cry a little bit. It's hard. It hits you right in those human emotions. And right after the event was over, the winning team, and I mean they got fuck you money, like $10 million for first place for a 5-man team.
Wow.
That's an absurd amount of money. The winner, the captain of the winning team, walked off the stage, and then they go into the little back area, and they, for a pretty long time, held this shot of just him tearing up. This fucking like, I've been working at this for 10 years, and I finally did it, and now I'm set for the rest of my life, kind of a thing. It was just like super powerful, to see that human connection, and because we see these players as just a name, just sort of an entity on the screen. A brand, people that we see them flame each other, and it's, it doesn't feel real. But then when you see that, all of a sudden you go, holy shit, I forgot there was like a real human behind that keyboard. And look at it, he's crying. Oh my God. It just, that was new for us. Huge. That's not something we had gotten a lot of at past events really ever. So, I kind of get it a little bit now. I felt alive for the first time in a while, Dylan. It was amazing.
That's amazing. That's awesome. I'm glad that happened, because that sounds like righteously incredible. I think a lot of the reasons people engage in any kind of form of entertainment is because they want to make a human connection of some kind, especially esports, because esports is a social thing. And I'll defer to you on that because you probably have a lot more robust opinions than I do. I don't play esports, but in general, I think people want to connect with others. You know, that's why we have Twitch chats, which I'm looking at, by the way, periodically, guys, very intently. But also, I think that's why, you know, Magic players. I play Magic the Gathering. That's the one thing. Someone asked me in chat if I played Dota. I said no, but I play Magic the Gathering and poker semi-professionally every once in a while. I'll pick that up for a few months. Yeah.
You live in Jersey too, so you can actually play like online, and Atlantic City is relatively nearby.
You can play online in New Jersey. You can play poker. It's unregulated.
I miss it. Well, it's regulated. It's just legal.
Right. It's regulated. That's what I meant. Yeah. If there's two things in the world right now with poker, and one's unregulated and the other is regulated, the unregulated ones are the ones that you can actually play. The regulated ones are where it's illegal in your state to play them.
Yes.
So that's what I meant by that. But you're right. Gotcha. It is regulated. It's people go on even in poker when you can't see their faces and stuff, and sometimes you walk into a game and you don't talk at all. People are they just they talk, you know, they find ways to get involved with each other. Magic.
Okay, Dylan, I want to share a story with you, actually. Maybe this will be a nice light piece to get this, because I don't think you're aware of this, and I'm actually curious. We're talking about humanizing entertainment, right? Humanizing brands. So I just had a run. You know who Andy Milonakis is?
Yeah, he's great.
He was on MTV like when we were a lot younger.
He's older than me, but
yeah. But he has a hormone disorder, so he looks younger than you. But I think he's actually 40 or 45, somewhere. Yeah. I'm not sure exactly. Anyway, long story short, Twitch has this thing now called Twitch IRL. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's for streaming like with a cell phone. You know, some of the popular streamers will like stream themselves going to a entertainment park or like a carnival or something like that, you know. So Twitch IRL, you know, you walk around now with phone, like 4G is good enough in cities that you can actually live stream from a cell phone. So Andy Milonakis does this a lot. He's pretty popular on Twitch. So at TI7 this year, MOONDUCK is doing content where we were doing Twitch IRL ourselves. And on the first day, it was when it was most popular. So there's like all these thousands of people, super hyped. TI hasn't started yet. And we did what we called the pre-show. So we were live before the tournament's pre-show started. So that like early morning, it was mostly just like us walking to the venue and all this and that. So we had to wait in line for like an hour to get our press badges. And as we were waiting in line, somebody came up and started talking to us and asked us, kind of what we were doing, how it works, and mentioned Andy Milonakis and asked why Andy Milonakis is popular. And I explained it in a rather crude, unprofessional way. Somebody clipped it, posted it on /r livestream fails. Andy Milonakis saw it and then tweeted a picture of me with dreads and said, "This is the Dota caster known for sniffing his balls on stream, and he has a big problem with my content." He thought I was using some hate speech. So Andy Milonakis and I aren't getting along anymore. Now, this was really jarring for me because from my perspective, it felt like if we were to make jokes about Jersey Shore right now and start blasting the situation in Snooki, I would never expect 5 hours from now to see the situation tweeting at me something like, "Well, you want to fight? You got a problem with what I do?" Like, you know what I mean? Like that, I would never expect that because they're not humanized. They're on that level. Like they should be used to, like, I'm so small compared to them. Who would even fucking care? But Andy Milonakis, he's in this weird state because I saw him on TV. I put him in that category, but he's kind of not really. He's just like a Twitch streamer now. He's not really that different from what we're doing right now. There's just another 0 at the end of his viewers. You know what I mean? So he's on Reddit. He's on the same channels. So I genuinely felt bad. I DM'd him an apology on Reddit, but he didn't reply. And I don't know. Part of me wonders if it was a little bit of a publicity stunt. He didn't block me on Twitter. You know, he didn't really like... If he was genuinely offended, I don't know. I wonder if he would have gone out of his way like that to make a big deal of it. But part of me thinks he wanted me to reply and just like, you know, say something like, "Oh, somebody's sensitive," and then we could just have a back and forth. And I don't know. Who knows? Who knows?
I would have liked that.
So anyway, sorry, that was a long-winded story, but how does that make you feel? Am I a bad person now? Do you think less of me? Because I genuinely felt bad. It tore me up for a couple days, man.
What did you say? What did you say specifically about him?
I could link you the clip. I used the word retarded a couple times.
Oh dear.
I said that he looks weird and like his shtick is that people can't tell if he's like kind of a retarded kid or like a midget or an adult with a growth disorder or if he's just weird. Like, you know, it was kind of like that. I didn't say anything that was not overtly, I didn't say anything overtly false. It just wasn't very nice. You know, I said it in like the meanest, most like, he looks kind of retarded way possible. So, you know, it's like if we had a couple beers and we were just joshing around and I got all riled up and started talking shit. That's exactly what it was like. Because that's what we were doing. Just for about 5 seconds, I kind of forgot I was holding the camera, you know? It's weird. Like, it's way different. Like, doing the Twitch IRL thing, like, this is different. I'm looking at the camera. Now I can see it. I can see all the bars. Like, I know I'm live. When you're just walking around with your cell phone like this and everyone's just talking, having normal conversation.
Yeah, okay.
It's like I didn't forget I was streaming, but as I was getting amped up and just riffing for that 60 seconds, I kind of did forget that I was holding my cell phone. Does that make sense? It's really hard to describe. It's because that was the first time we'd ever done Twitch IRL. You know, so it's just a lot different. And not that I wouldn't have said it anyway. You know, again, like in my head, I never ever thought it was something that he would see, hear, or give two shits about.
Right.
I don't know, man.
That's interesting.
Weird.
I don't know. So you're saying because you were streaming via your phone, it was easier to meld back into reality and sort of be relaxed and say things you might not have said otherwise.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like my filters were different. You know, it felt like I was just hanging out with friends rather than like producing a show.
Right. Okay, that's interesting.
And like sometimes when we're doing a show, we cross the line, but it's usually like if one of us has a really edgy joke, you know. So here's a good example. One time at the last top, Black said, "Okay, what is a line that could get me make sure that I never get hired from a Valve event again?" And he said, "Okay, this is terrible. I don't want to say it." And the line was, "Why does Valve only hire white people? Because there are no black Dota casters at all. They're basically all white. It's like a couple Asians, they're basically all white. And it's
is
you know,
Dota
it's
a Valve
one of those
production?
Huh?
Is Dota a Valve production?
Valve makes the game.
Okay.
So, but TI Valve in the past has hired talent.
Okay.
So it's for the main event. So anyway, it's just like something like that. You know, that's not something that like we know ahead of time. He asks us and everybody kind of gives input and kind of says like, "Yeah, it's pretty fucking over the line, but I don't know, man. I think you could probably get away with it." It's more tactful in nature. It's more thoughtful. The Andy Milonakis thing was literally just me riffing and getting carried away. So that was why I felt bad. And I did feel bad, like thinking maybe there's a world where he's a real person and he's genuinely offended. Maybe there's some weird world where he kind of likes Dota or thought that Moonduck was maybe sort of cool and now he thinks that we're a bunch of dumb bitches. Like, that sucks, man. I feel bad. You know, I don't really want to go out of my way to make people feel bad. It's just my fucked up sense of humor when I'm feeling amped up and running on adrenaline, you know?
Yeah. I mean, so it's, I mean, a couple of your streamer or the people who are watching the stream in the Twitch chat, they've linked like what you actually said, and I haven't read it, but just, you know, based on what you've said, it, you know, it's you said it sounds like, and this is your words, that you went a little overboard. I have no place to make any judgment on it. You know, I'm not, I wasn't there or anything like that.
You can judge me, man. It's all good. I don't care.
Well, I can, but I'm going to reserve judgment because I don't know anything about the situation. Also, there's something to take into account. I mean, I really love stand-up comedy. It's one of my favorite fucking things in the entire world. And the stance of a lot of stand-up comedians is that there are no topics that are unbroachable. You should be able to talk about whatever you want. It's humor. It's fucking jokes. People will get over it. Like, and you know, there's what's his name? Anthony Jeselnik is really hard-lined on that. Very hard-line on that. And I don't know. It's left an impression on me just listening to it. And I'm not that kind of person. Like, I don't like to, you know, I don't like to piss people off very much. I'll do it if I have to, and if it serves a good purpose. But it's not my favorite thing. But it seems like he likes it. My point in saying that is that Andy Milonakis is a comedian, and he's a funny guy, and he knows comedy business. He's been in it for a long time. I think he should probably know that.
So
people are gonna say stupid shit that's meant to make other people
someone
laugh.
said to me that part of why he was so mad is likely because I reduced what he does to just like, oh, he just goes out in public, looks weird and makes noises, and that's why people like, because he's unpredictable and he fancies himself as a comic.
Exactly,
you know?
And he's going up and
it's like
he does really funny, inflammatory stuff in public. I've seen a lot of it. I love Andy Milonakis. I think he's a genius.
Me too.
Like, he's a really funny fucking guy.
He was our motivation to do the Twitch IRL stream, dude.
See, okay,
like,
so but you've seen his stuff. Then he goes up and he goes up to people in public and he does weird ass fucking things to make them uncomfortable.
Yeah.
For your amusement, and he's not like fucking stabbing them in the fucking arm or anything like that. He's making fun of them and doing silly shit, pretending he's, you know, a little boy and being helpless and all kinds of weird shit that he does. He knows what it's like. I think, you know, maybe there is some publicity thing. Someone in the chat says that it's kind of weak that I didn't put an opinion on the what's it called, on didn't pass a judgment on you because I didn't watch the video. I'm trying to I'm trying to do a lot of stuff right now, and one of them is focus and pay attention to my friend Andrew.
I mean, it's
and
you can watch it
I'm not
later.
watching. I'll watch it later.
I think
yeah.
I summarized it pretty well. I probably left out like 20% of the keywords that were sort of offensive, but that's the gist of it. So, you know, you're not missing a whole lot. It's only a 60-second clip. You know, how bad could it be, right?
Right. Sure.
I
don't really care, to be honest. I don't think it matters. I'll watch it, but I think that it's if you were saying in humorous context, then I think a person who you know specializes in making people laugh at the expense of others should understand that.
Yeah.
And
well,
I think it's likely that he does. This stuff might even just be like, you know, a publicity stunt, like you said.
Yeah. It could be, you know, and I feel bad saying that in case there's a reality where it's not a publicity stunt, but it just made me wonder a little bit, you know,
Possibly.
like that's why I didn't respond to him publicly. I just sent him a private message. So I'm like, you know, if he's actually upset and wants to talk about this, he'll reply, and that like my account's obvious. I have like a fuckload of karma, you know, he should be able to see it's me. I guess I could have DM'd him on Twitter, but you know, whatever. It was sort of weird though. It was humbling isn't the right word, but it was sort of a reality check for me where I realized that I have become noticeably colder. And I've known this, right? Just working in live production and having to read Twitch chat every time you're live, and just so much of the work we do isn't fair. It's a popularity contest. You know, getting gigs for tournaments isn't always about who's objectively the best. There's a whole lot of other factors and connections and stuff that goes into it. So it's just it's easy to get a little cold, you know, and especially with my particular history with the whole sniff thing, you know, and you know, some of the cyberbullying that went on with that. I've just gotten progressively more cold. And now to me, like saying that stuff, when I started reading the stuff on my Twitter, just like, dude, that's really fucked up. You shouldn't have said that stuff about Andy. I had to go back and like find the clip to figure out what I even said. I couldn't even remember. It didn't faze me at all. You know, it was just like, oh yeah, this is just normal content. Oh, somebody's upset. Let's see, you know. Then once I saw it, I was like, okay. I mean, I see why out of context this seems over the line, but it was a weird, it made me feel like an animal. I felt like fucking Arnold Schwarzenegger from that Batman movie, man. Nothing but ice.
That's interesting you say that, because right before this story, you prefaced it with a story about a really humanizing event with an interview with players that had just won a lot of money.
Andy Milonakis was day one, and that like winning moment when he started crying and they held the shot, that was literally right after they won on the last day. So we had a 7-day lag time.
Okay, cool. Well, that's good to know though, because now it sounds like you've got two stories in your life, and one of them is one that to you at least partly reveals how cold you can be and how this stuff doesn't affect you. And maybe, and I know what you mean with that sometimes. And the internet, I think you'll agree, can have a really it can really ice your heart up sort of in a way that other contexts don't. So I know what it feels like to sort of get cold and emotionless about things that you would normally be very sensitive about. So it's nice that you have that, and it's kind of disturbing too. That sounds like that's what you're saying. It's kind of you're disturbed by it. It has benefits, obviously. Being cold can let you have a freedom to say things that you wouldn't normally say. But then you also have humanizing events in your life, which you should gravitate towards, I think. Yeah. Which include, you know, when people reveal parts of their character that are very, you know, vulnerable. So yeah, I think, you know, don't despair. Just yeah, you have a nice balance.
I wonder how much of it comes like part and parcel with the medium that we use so much, like this text-based Twitch chat, right? It's hard to humanize all of these individuals because it's just all characters. It's just different colored names in a chat room, anonymous, and half of them have stupid names like I cannot find a username or propaganda NA or every goddamn name is taken. You know what I mean?
Every goddamn name is taken. That's a good one.
It's hard to humanize that. And dude, it's not out of the realm of possibility that some of those people in Twitch chat are the same person with multiple tabs pretending to be different people to try to rile up the conversation.
Is that true, guys? Is that what you are?
I'm not saying that's happening now. I'm saying that happened before, right? There's nothing stopping people from doing it. So it's just
Rap says he or she is a person.
So let me throw it at you from another angle, right? So I've been dating somebody for almost a year now. That's also new for me. I took a half decade off dating. Right, I focused on video games for about 5 years instead of girls. So, right, that's kind of nice. And one thing that I've observed over that year is when we argue via text message or like just typing, like some sort of just text base, and we can't hear or see each other, it always goes worse. It takes longer to come to a resolution, and if we don't come to a resolution, that kind of dangling end feels a lot more unsatisfying and just fucking like, I have all these things I want to fucking say and I just can't get it out right because this stupid medium keeps getting me into these weird threads I don't want to talk about. And then like every time we actually talk about it in real life and we're fighting, it lasts for 5 minutes and then we come to a resolution and it's over. And when you can see the other person, you realize you're like, come on, man. I know I can trust you. What am I talking about? When it's just text, you're like, I don't know. This could be a lie or it could be truth. I'm not really sure, you know?
Right.
And it's just, it's weird to me. Like, it makes me wonder, like, how much is this fucking, I'm holding up my phone, like, how much is this fucking thing fucking up my life? You know what I mean? How many of the conversations where I'm mad at somebody or I've ripped off at someone is because I couldn't fucking see them and I'm just texting them? You know, how many of my problems could have been solved from just video chatting instead of voice chatting with people, you know? It makes you wonder.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's kind of a Are you implying almost that the disconnectedness created by just texts, you know, just like sending texts, is potentially causing you a lot of dishonest situations that you wouldn't necessarily be in otherwise?
I don't know if I would have chosen the word dishonest, but it's more for I used to say maybe 5 or 10 years ago that typing or instant message is my favorite way of communication, right? I mean, I've been in several long-distance relationships, so that's a big part of that connection. You have to kind of be able to communicate when you can't talk. So I used to really gravitate towards that, and for the first time in my life, I feel like, you know, I'm having much more satisfying, difficult conversations when I'm person-to-person with someone, and I'm, like, really noticing a gap where the texting or instant message just seems to be a medium that is ineffective for dealing with hard emotional conversation. It's just I've just observed that as a trend, and that's sort of as far as I've gotten with it. That's weird for me. That's a change.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm gonna go off some of the things that people are saying in the chat. I don't know how to pronounce that name. Arkeys was mentioned that the biological factors of body language, and that's why I do like video chats. I do like Skype. I've also been in long-term relationship or long-distance relationships, and anytime I could video chat her, that was the best thing for me to do. Yeah. And but I've also been on the other side of that, where I think some people are a lot more comfortable talking about emotional issues when they don't have to see your face, and I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but I've definitely allowed that to happen. Even recently, there was a girl that I broke up with, and you know, I asked her, I said, like, this is the kind of stuff I'm about to say is the kind of stuff that we should talk about over the phone, but if you don't want to, we don't have to. And she's like, I'd rather just talk over text. And you know, it's hard for me to like press the issue there and say, no, we really should talk over the phone, blah, blah, blah. Like, this is my preference. If she gives a notable preference, I don't know what to do there. So I just went with it. And
it's not all bad, because I've found myself, like, the advantage of texting is I found myself having the advantage of writing something, reading it back, erasing it, and writing something else. So I find when I'm texting, there is less of that I say something I don't mean, because I can really think about every single word before I press send. Whereas when you're in real life, you don't have that. You know, you sort of get to think before you speak, but once you get charged up, it just comes out. And once it's out there, you can't take it back, man. You know, once you really hurt somebody's feelings, just saying sorry is not the same thing as never having have said it in the first place. Not even close. So that is one big advantage. So I don't completely detest it. It's just like I said, it's just an anomaly, man. It's a change in the force, and it's fucking freaking me out. My midi-chlorians are tickling me bum, and I don't like it.
Yeah, there's a disturbance in the force. And fuck midi-chlorians. We could talk about that for an hour and a half. Not that we're going to.
Fuck midi-chlorians. See, there you go. Now you're showing your nerd stripes, dude.
I've got no fucking love for the midi-chlorian thing. When I first saw it, I was younger, and I didn't really care. But now that I've gotten older and I've watched the old ones again, they did such a good job in episode 4. Just a small tangent, very small. In New Hope, they did such a good job of making it like a mystical force.
Yeah,
and it was impossible to explain, and it was impossible to understand in its fullest. But it was a force that everyone could feel and understand. Even a dick like Han Solo was like, that shit doesn't apply to me. He's saying that shit, which means you know, philosophically he's implying, analytically you're saying that's a thing. So yeah, I like that better. But yeah, sorry about that little. Anytime someone says the word midi-chlorian, I have to say all of that. Everything that I just said, I have to say it.
Dude, no, that's good. That's like a PSA that people need to hear. It's a conversation worth repeating, because not enough people are passionate about midi-chlorians. and the damage they could potentially be doing to the Star Wars franchise.
Yeah.
I was worried that Abrams was going to fuck that whole thing up, and I think it's been pretty good so far. I'm excited for the next one. I am really intrigued to see where the story goes. That is the one aspect of this like current Star Wars thing. I really don't know what they're going to do with it. So I will be watching the new movies, but I hope they don't fuck it up. That's all I can say. Did you like do you like the double female lead thing? Both of the Star Wars movies had female leads. Were you into it?
Yeah, I liked that. I thought they were both decent actresses. I thought the real problem with those movies was the setting and the scenery and the dialogue. I think they did an awful job of putting you in a new place. See, I really didn't like the new trilogy at first, but then when I saw 7, I had a renewed appreciation for it because something it did do for me. It put me in a scene that I've never seen before. I mean, the episode 2 when they're in Coruscant and they're chasing that like bounty hunter or whatever, and that's what I want out of a fucking Star Wars movie. I just saw this 1, 2, 3, 4 plot line. I would like to see a new plot line and new ideas and new things I've never seen. And we saw TIE fighters and a fucking new Death Star, and the only new thing that was in that movie that was really cool and unique was the New Republic, where they go back to the old system of government, and then what do? They fucking blow it all up. They blow up every goddamn planet that is new and interesting, and they show you a 3-second pan of all those people with their cool costumes and shit, and they all die horribly in an explosion.
Well, so some people, the counter analysis I heard to that was the first one had to do that, right? The first one had to set the stage. It had to give you that nostalgia feel, hit all of your buttons to kind of close up those loose ends from the last 6 movies that you love and enjoy. Close that shit up in the first movie and then plant the seeds for the beginning of a really good storyline. Where it's going to be, again, where like A New Hope did the same thing. Empire came out swinging, and then Return of the Jedi was maybe not the best, but it hit it home and wrapped up the whole fucking story. And I think they might follow that same arc. So I'm going to judge this trilogy based on the next movie. What's this one called? The Last Jedi? If this one is 9 out of 10, then I'm going to have a lot of faith for the last one. If this one sucks, it's over.
I don't really care. I'm watching all of them now, right? I mean, I love Star Wars. I consider this past one to be like a 6 or a 7, which is well below expectations. Not Rogue One, that was garbage. I hated that. But what is it? It really was. It wasn't garbage. That's not fair, but it was not very good. I did not like it very much. And again, that's something we could talk about for thousands of hours.
Yeah, that movie's not worth the hours. It's true.
But I thought this other one was a 6 out of 10, a 7 out of 10. I'm talking about episode 7, and I was just. That's well below my expectation for a Star Wars movie. I thought it should have been, it's a successor to one of the greatest series of all time, so it should have been a 9 out of 10, a 9 or a 10.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So
man.
We'll see. If this next one is a 4, I won't. I mean, I will be very disappointed, but I would love for it to be a great movie. But I'll still watch the 9th one. I'll still watch their Boba Fett thing. It'll take me a lot to get off.
For sure.
Series,
no,
because it's been so good.
We're in the same camp, man. It'll take a lot for me not to at least watch him and see how the whole damn thing ends. But all right, last movie I want to bring up before we start talking about some of the heavy stuff. Have you seen Dunkirk, the new Christopher Nolan?
Yeah,
dude.
I saw it like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
What did you think? I thought it was fantastic, like absolutely amazing. Were you not?
I was
not sold.
I was not sold.
What?
I know. I thought I was gonna love it. I thought this was gonna be just my kind of movie. But I think it was missing some key elements that make a movie really good for me. And it was really a matter of particularity for me. So I mean, I thought that why did you like the movie? What did you like about it?
The cinematography was great. I like that it had limited dialogue. I think there are so many movies these days that are trying to be the next grandiose Titanic, fucking Black Hawk Down, Apocalypse Now, these 3-hour epics into the jungle with all these soliloquies and allegory. Fuck it. I'm over that shit, dude. I can't sit in a movie theater for 3.5 hours. I got to piss like 3 times throughout that movie. All right. That movie was like 1 hour and 40 minutes. It was the perfect length. It didn't drag on too long. It showed a really cool aspect of war. Like that Dunkirk story is really interesting, and it's like really powerful and amazing in a different aspect, where it shows this whole side of like civilians getting involved to rescue soldiers, not soldiers shooting other soldiers. Like, I thought it was going to be like Saving Private Ryan, and I loved that there was almost no blood in it. All the death was like, a boat sinks and 300 people die in the boat and you see them drowning, but there isn't a lot of like, legs getting blown off and that kind of stuff. I felt like it showed like war is a very, very complex thing, like military resource management itself is a very complicated kind of interesting logistical conundrum. So when you see all these like awesome war movies like Saving Private Ryan, yeah, they're cool, but they always focus on like the most topical, like sniper kind of shit. And I like that this one showed another aspect of it. And I'm also a sucker for Tom Hardy. I won't lie. I liked seeing him fly around in that plane without any gas, just fucking lighting up the Germans.
He was great.
It was, I don't know, man. It struck me as a powerful movie. I usually feel like I'm not very moved by historically accurate films where I'm just like, yeah, I know what happened, but it was before my time. I can't really relate to this. That one, that old dude driving the boat and the fucking kid that dies and all that stuff, I'm kind of like, dude, like when it ended, I was like, why did the kid tell the guy the kid was going to live? Why didn't he fucking punch him or something? And Ma just looked at me and was like, because the kid knows that guy's life is already ruined. And that's just going to make it worse. And I'm like, Ma, you're going to make me fucking cry, dude. Jesus Christ, this movie kicks ass. It just...
Yeah, that was a good scene.
Yeah, I felt like it had a lot of those kind of good scenes. It was just methodical. It didn't feel slow and it didn't feel long. I just thought it was well done, man. It felt like a fresh take on a war movie.
I dig it. Yeah, I think it definitely had a fresh approach. That's something it had going for it. And as far as cinema, I always get this wrong, or this word fucked up. Cinematography, is that right? Cinematography, let's just call it that. That was stellar. That was really cool. But it was awful too. The cinematography was also one of the worst parts of the movie, in my opinion.
How so?
Okay, so one of the things I really like about movies, and one of the things I really like about all kinds of art, is that it does an excellent job, especially movies, because they have a time that they have to elapse. They spend some time where they build up tension. This is very elementary. This is extremely elementary, in my opinion. And then they release that tension, and that's that's part of the rush of watching these movies. And if you go back and watch Dunkirk's first 20 or 30 minutes, it's an awful, awful, awful experience, in my opinion. It's just terrible, because they one of the best ways you can build tension is with score, with music. And what they did was they elevated the score, and they elevated the score, and I have to duck down because they just kept on elevating the score all the way the fuck up, and they kept on elevating the action, and then they like recess the action after like the first scene where he gets away and his 5 buddies are killed by those guys, and it's those like French gunners who save him or whatever. That he meets that guy who's digging out the body. The music is still going up at that point. See, the tense scene has already passed. I get it. He's at war, and war is full of tension. But life is full of tension. It doesn't mean you don't release it sometimes. You're not going to tell me, like, you can't tell me that kid feels less relieved than when he was being shot at.
No, but I think that's like the whole thing. That's like what makes the Dunkirk aspect of that war such a unique story, is that they kept feeling like, okay, it's over. Like that moment, oh, we're on the boat. There's the ladies with the little tea and stuff. Like, you kept thinking that the tension was about to be released, and then more shit kept blowing up, and then the next boat gets sunk, and then more planes. It's like they kept thinking, oh, we're finally home free. So isn't that just it's like foreshadowing in the score, or it's like, okay, he's it's not over yet. It's still building.
Of course, but that's essential in any movie. Where you have dips like that. I mean, you can take the Star Wars movies, for instance. So when Luke and Obi-Wan and Han Solo in New Hope, they just barely get it out of alive off of Tatooine, because they got stormtroopers on their tail and stuff like that, and then they make it into hyperspace or whatever the fuck. Before they make it into hyperspace, they're getting like attacked by Star Destroyers, and they're getting shot at. The ship is rumbling, and they do a really great job with the set in that movie. And then it's just this big buildup, and you're not sure if they're going to escape, and then boom, they get away. He goes into hyperspace, and then you have lots of nice dead space. And what do you do with that dead space? You build your characters. They did not have an ever escalating score in that movie, not at that point.
All
because
right.
that was when
All right.
Obi-Wan was teaching Luke how to be a Jedi.
No, I get you. See,
showing
but
him
it's
the
different
ropes.
though. It's like Star Wars is trying to tell.
Right, but why do we want to be different from greatness? Like I don't understand. Like I'm all for trying to be different if you want to revolutionize the film industry. If you want to revolutionize, I like that. And that's why I'm not against Dunkirk. I don't think it's an awful movie.
But you didn't love it.
I think they tried and they failed. That's what I think. I think they tried and they failed.
No,
you know,
I can respect that, dude. It's cool. I like that we disagree about it. To me,
yeah, me too.
That's what makes it a good movie, is that it's different, and like that's why I liked it, because I felt like there was a different pace and a different tempo.
Yes.
And I like.
If you like that, then that's great.
It kept me building.
I think it was very annoying.
So, well, all right, that's cool though. I like.
It's good that you like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right, well, so there you go, folks. Dunkirk.
I'd like them to try it again. Even I'd like them to try it again and see if they can't fix some of it, because I think seriously, because I think it was a really bad.
just try it again. Pick a different war, a different thing, and just try it
different
again.
Thing.
You know?
Yeah.
Like,
I think the idea of raising tension more than you would normally was really cool. And I think you said one of the things you liked the most about that film was one of the things I disliked the most, which was how little dialogue there was. I mean, I think one of the main reasons I go to watch movies and
dude,
just
I'm so tired.
I like
of these
empathizing
fucking
with people.
Game of Thrones, Harry Potter level in-depth universes. Like, what was that other movie that was just out? Illyria or Avernia. It was supposed to be like the new Avatar. Dude, no one gives a shit, because it's just this super in-depth, wannabe interesting sci-fi world that, like, I don't know if it's based on a book or what, but it doesn't feel like it's worth the time to learn the lore in this stupid universe, because you're going to watch a 2-hour movie and it's over. You know, and that's why this is different from Star Wars, because Star Wars is building those characters. You know, they're really trying. Lord of the Rings as well. It's all about character development. That's what makes those movies good. That's why those trilogies, both Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, are literally epics, because the characters have so much variation and development over the whole series. Dunkirk's not about the characters. It's about the amalgamation of war and all the people coming together, not as individuals, but as a mass. You know, I think that's why they intentionally made it to not have a lot of dialogue. But I don't know. I think
that's awful. I think that's an awful idea in general. Like I said, I admire people who try and do things different and departing from character. So okay, there's this really crazy movie called Eraserhead, and maybe some of the people in the Twitch chat have heard of or watched Eraserhead. Eraserhead is, so some movies do a really great job of building a very interesting plot and a very interesting storyline. They almost never do it without characters, which is why the second thing, the most important thing to me, is character development. So those are the two traditional things that you try and do. You try and develop plot, you try and develop characters, and make them both really interesting. And the plot will only be, in my opinion, as interesting as your characters. That's why Game of Thrones is interesting.
Okay.
Because it has a fascinating plot. It really does. It's very fascinating, and multifaceted. But it's only because you're interested in those characters, in my opinion.
Well, all right. So we just look for different things and types of entertainment.
Here's the thing. This next sort of thing that I think Eraserhead and what's it called? And one of your chat people just said it's a masterpiece. I think it is a masterpiece, but it's awful. I hate it. Like I personally hate shit like that, because it's exhibitionism. It's not about plot. It's not about characters. Like they have those things, they have those elements, but it's really about just showing you all these incredible things. This guy David Lynch is a genius at sending these amazing things. But I'm not going to an art exhibit.
Yeah,
I'm not going to see a bunch of amazing things. I'm going to relate to people, because that's what I like out of stories. That's why I like Star Wars, is because I love Luke, and I love he's a fucking little idiot. He's a little whiny bitch, and that's what people said he's so bad about him. No, that's what makes you easy to relate to, because you're also a whiny bitch. Most people have bad characteristics, and it's easier to see those. And then he grows, and then by Return of the Jedi, he's this super powerful, awesome guy who still has some anger in his heart.
It's like he's humanized, right?
He's humanized, exactly.
To bring it all back.
That's more interesting than anything you can do, in my opinion. Because we're all humans.
Okay.
We're all people. That's one thing that we can all agree on, probably.
Well,
maybe some people wouldn't, but that's fine.
Fuck me, dude.
Most of us will.
What a perfect segue into the meat and potatoes, what we want to talk about, man. That was great. I'm glad we disagreed about Dunkirk and movies, man. Thank you for that.
It's a good topic. We talked about that for 1,000 years.
So, but the big stuff, obviously, free speech, I think, is kind of the main topic, and how it relates to the recent political issues in America. Big ones I want to tackle, buddy. Monuments, all the Confederate stuff. They've been torn down recently. A lot of them have been defaced. And then, of course, just there's been recent political movements all across the country in various locations to have them removed properly or put in museums or whatever the fuck they do when they actually decommission federal statues. And then the other aspect is just all of this kind of neo-Nazi stuff and the dialogue surrounding that. Part of the reason it's an interesting conversation is because right now both sides are just completely polarized. If you don't immediately denounce Nazis as the worst people in the world, the folks on the other side will just call you a Nazi sympathizer, and if you don't basically just agree with the Nazis, they think you suck, or not the Nazis. If you don't, or I don't even know what the right feels about Nazis right now. I don't know. That's part of why this is interesting, is because Trump hasn't really denounced them. The
Republicans have denounced them. They've all denounced them. I think that's
everyone but Trump, right? Is that the
no?
thing?
Even Trump. No, Trump has. He's done it twice publicly.
Okay, all right, good.
He's gone up and he says, "I denounce the KKK, I denounce the Nazis, I denounce the alt-right." I think they're awful. You know, you could watch his videos.
Right.
They're short. They're like 3 minutes.
What really started it was that first speech he made about it, though, when he said that there was violence on both sides, right? Like there were
many sides.
Yeah, both sides are at fault, I guess, and that was the original statement that really got everything into this incendiary place. And I recommended folks watch the Vice special that they did about it. I still think it's pretty good. It's only 25 minutes, and it just they spend a lot of time on the ground actually talking to the neo-Nazi types. The one guy that they interview, I think he's either in jail or he got arrested and will probably be in jail for a while for illegal use of pepper spray. Pepper sprayed somebody at the rally.
Yeah.
That Cantwell guy. So he's actually in jail. So I guess. Well done. That's a victory for some folks out there, but I don't even know exactly where to start this conversation, Dylan. Let's start on the free speech side, and then I want to talk about the monuments because that's an aspect I feel a little more strongly about. Okay. Where do you stand on this whole side? You know, like one of the aspects. So here's maybe a good starting point. At these rallies, right? We have the Second Amendment. These neo-Nazis are super armed, right? They're all wearing bulletproof vests. They've got these massive weapons, AR-15s and whatnot. Like they are ready to fucking go if shit goes down. And running people over with the car, some shit went down. But in terms of the amount of firepower they have, it hasn't really gone cataclysmic, but where the potential is there. And someone brought up to me, aren't they kind of like taunting people by doing that? Like they're allowed to have those guns, but at what point does a peaceful assembly become not peaceful? Even if you're like, are you inciting violence if you're standing there with a gun taunting people saying, come on, let's go, I'm ready, if you throw the first punch? You know, does that cross a line? Like where does that gray area become, okay, this is no longer protected free speech? You know, that's sort of the interesting aspect, I guess.
So that's interesting, and that's a really great place to start, I think, because I'd say so. There's two ways I always try and look at this particular instance, and then all politics. It's legality, and then it's moral implications. So as far as crossing any legal lines, I think there's no argument, in my opinion. They crossed no legal lines by having guns. They crossed no legal lines by having weapons or anything like that. They got a permit. The demonstrators. At Charlottesville, I mean the original demonstrators, the alt-right, the neo-Nazis, KKK, whatever you want to call them, whatever's best. I'll just call them the alt-right. It's easy.
Sure.
And yeah, they had a permit and they had a bunch of weapons. So that's and in Virginia, or I'm sorry, in Charlottesville, and it's which is in Virginia, right? I should probably know that, but
I think so.
Yeah,
I don't know it definitively either, which is embarrassing.
I looked up the laws in Charlottesville.
It's Virginia.
So in Charlottesville, and I assume in Virginia as well, the gun laws are extremely loose. You're allowed to have guns in public. There's people all around that protest who had guns. So that, as far as legalism goes, no, I don't think they crossed any lines. Moral boundaries, yes, I think they absolutely cross moral boundaries, because if you're trying to have a peaceful protest and you're trying to promote the interchange of ideas through a free speech forum, then you should not bring weapons. You should not, or you should be at least very, very careful about bringing them. So there's one side of this argument which is very interesting, which says that it was integral. It was absolutely very important for them to bring the weapons because that was them exercising their Second Amendment right in a peaceful manner. Right. They were saying, we have guns, we're proud of having guns, we want to have them in our society, and we're going to prove it by bringing them to this rally and not using them. And in a sense, they succeeded in that because there was no gun violence. All the violence was with like blunt weapons and throwing bottles and
like mace and that kind of stuff.
Mace and things like that. Yes, but there was no gun violence. And there was obviously the awful fucking maniac who drove his car into a bunch of people and killed one person, but no gun violence. So, I think though you should be very, very careful when you bring weapons to a rally, and this goes for the left as well. This goes for Antifa. If you bring weapons to a rally and you're purporting to be in favor of free speech and you really should think about what you're trying to talk to and what you're trying to accomplish, because there is a sense where you're holding up these symbols, blood and soil, and all these things that are extremely antagonizing, and people see them as threats.
Yeah.
Now, legally, I think you should not see them as that. I think you should, as a citizen, you should look at that and say, okay, they absolutely have a right to protest. They are talking about the flag. They're talking about this or that. It doesn't matter what they're talking about. Actually, they could be talking about idolizing Hitler. They could be talking about killing all black people, which are things that no one, I think, most people don't agree with. But like, as long as they're just talking about it and they're not making any actual threats, which is illegal, actual threats are illegal, then they are legally within their bounds. So, and what should you do as Antifa? What should you do? They have weapons now. What should you do? That's a good question. Should you come in force or should you not? Now, there's a good argument for coming in force, because coming in force means that you're going to protect yourself and you're supporting your right to protect yourself, and also make sure that you won't let some militant, crazy shit happen. There's lots of interesting ideas around that. I think the better argument is that you should not do that. That you should try and present yourself as a level-headed person. You should try and present yourself as a person who's interested in speech, and you prove that by not bringing weapons. You prove that the only arsenal that you've brought is your words and your ideas, and that's the only thing that you. And people across Charlottesville, if people look up, there's lots of great videos about Charlottesville coverage that are not, from Fox News or CNN or any of the larger media outlets on either side. There are lots of interesting videos of people getting together and talking to each other, and you can tell these people are not on the same side.
Yeah,
but they're still talking to each other. They're having real civil, and they vary in their scope and their level of civility. But there are people. I mean, I remember a conversation between like a black reporter, a black journalist, and like 7 white guys with their shirts off. One of them had a bloody head. It's not hard to infer what side he's on.
Yeah.
One of them had a Confederate flag, and then the guy was talking for like a minute and a half, and then the black guy, and the guys were listening. They were all listening, and then they spoke for like a minute and a half, and then he listened, and that's exactly what you want. I think that's the absolute. These guys are the real fucking heroes right now, because if you think their ideas are ridiculous, well, maybe they fucking are. They probably are, actually. But if they really are ridiculous, then they shouldn't have sway over a logical people. Like, what is the point of trying to shut down the free speech rallies of the KKK?
Yeah,
like that's a gift. They're a gift to us. Like if we're civil people and we're reasonable people and we hear them spouting racist, anti-Semitic nonsense, then that's a gift. That's a boon. That just shows anybody who has any sense that these people really do believe this stuff, and this is the depth of their beliefs. And I'm very much in favor of listening to people to the full extent of their logical beliefs and trying to parse them out. And that's the only way to change people's minds. Not just those people, because you might not ever change a radical's mind, but people listen to that stuff. Well, and you can change moderates' minds all the time. That's what it means to be a moderate. That's what it means to be an independent.
I agree with you. I mean, in general, I think it's dangerous just to write people off and completely tune them out, because that just polarizes them even more. It's very that's like a very condescending thing to do to someone. Just write them off. I'm not even going to listen to you because you're so crazy. But I want to just mention real quick that New York Times article, that IRL Rabbit link. Yeah, that one of those neo-Nazis, dude, definitely fired a weapon. There's footage of it. He shot that pistol. I think the headline is that he was arrested. Yeah. So I guess they're not obviously not completely people. But thank you for sharing.
Absolutely not. No, it's good to note that I don't think their intentions are peaceful. Clearly, their intentions aren't fully peaceful, because they have the weapons there in the first place. Which is not in and of itself to denote that they are violent, because just having the weapons, like I said, can just be a demonstration that you are.
Dude, IRL Rabbit, that's a gentleman I met at TI, by the way. He brought up literally, like, I was going to bring this up on my phone next. The paradox of tolerance, that Karl Popper thing. Surely you're familiar with this, Dylan?
I'm definitely familiar with Karl Popper.
Well, so it's the idea. It's like this kind of weird paradox of tolerance. So, like, should a tolerant society tolerate intolerance? It's what you basically just said. It's a paradox, but unlimited tolerance can lead to the extinction of tolerance, right? And you can click on the Wikipedia if me reading it is not very helpful for you. because it's when we extend tolerance to those who are openly intolerant. There's a picture of Hitler. The tolerant ones end up being destroyed, and tolerance along with them. So any movement preaching intolerance and persecution must be outside of the law. As paradoxical as it may seem, defending tolerance requires to not tolerate the intolerant.
That's ridiculous to me. That's
yeah, it's sort of the opposite of what you just said.
That's an extremely dangerous argument to make, in my opinion. I think Karl Popper is a very smart guy. I respect the bridge he's trying to make between science and politics in general in his work. But I think that you have to be very careful when you make arguments like that, because tolerance is not intolerance is not an inherently bad thing, obviously. Because if you're intolerant of intolerance, then you're allowing yourself to say, oh, it's okay to be intolerant sometimes of certain things, which is true. That's eminently true. Anytime you have a law, then you should not tolerate the things that law protects against. So, for instance, if someone is murdered or raped or shot, then you should not tolerate that. That's where it crosses the line. Mm-hmm. When you incriminate, or when you threaten to incriminate, those are the times when you should be intolerant, in my opinion. Every other time, if people are peaceful and they're following all the laws, and maybe they're following all the laws, and you think some of the laws are bad, that's fine. The reaction is not to take things into your own hands, which is what I think happened with the statues, in some cases, where people tear them down. I'm not in favor or against the statues. I think if I was on those city councils, if it was my decision, which it's not, I live in New Jersey, it's none of my business, in my opinion. But if I was on those city councils and I had any ordinance over that, I'd say those are in federal public space, and they are representations of a rebellion. We wouldn't have a statue of Hitler, out in the open. Why would we have a statue of Robert E. Lee? He was an enemy of the state. So put that in a museum. But that doesn't mean you can tear it down.
Right.
You have to, in my opinion, you have to follow due process and law.
Right.
And the idea that you should be intolerant of intolerance is, it's a wholesale paradoxical argument.
But
and
I want to challenge an aspect of your argument here, right? So before we digress into statues, I want to agree with the original premise that you put out, that if you give an open platform to people and you have these crazy neo-Nazis, once you break down their argument and figure out what they're really about, it doesn't really make sense. So the logical conclusion is this movement won't grow because giving them a platform almost does more damage to them than it helps them, because they're so ridiculous and they're so hateful. Is that the general?
If their ideas are truly bad, then they'll make them evident as bad, and most moderates will believe that they're bad.
I like that logical flow, except for the fact that the neo-Nazi movement is growing, right? So that doesn't really seem to be a truth to me at the moment. So what happens if that growth doesn't stop? So that the argument that you applied, how do you explain Hitler in that? Doesn't there come a point where you have to stand up for people being persecuted?
Yes. There is, absolutely. But I think we should be extremely careful of when we do that, because there are times that we allow ourselves to. So first of all, I don't know if the neo-Nazi movement has been growing. If you happen to have facts and stuff that imply that, then I'd love for you to send me those, because I need to review that.
I need to do some Googling. I'll admit I don't have hard data in front of me, but I mean, and to be fair, that could be the media scare in me, where neo-Nazis have been getting more coverage recently, so I have this feeling like they're growing more than ever, but it's just because they're making more headlines. That doesn't necessarily mean their numbers are increasing.
Okay, so that's fine. That's a problem too, though. So let's say their ideas are growing and their numbers are staying the same, or let's say their ideas are growing and their numbers are increasing as well. I think I can provide a pretty reasonable explanation for that, because what happened at Charlottesville was not allowing them to have a platform. That's the exact opposite. Well, people went, and I'll target Antifa because this is the name that I know, and I've also researched them, more extensively than I think a lot of people have. And they were at the rally and they were shouting people down, and all capacities too. So I mean, that's your explanation right there. There's a video of a guy who had a Confederate flag. He had an M16. He had a Beretta, and he was standing, an odd 20 feet away from the Robert E. Lee statue and saluting it. And at the beginning of the video, it was just him. And then as they cut like more and more phases of the video, more and more people come up to him and they start screaming in his face, like they're 6 inches away from this guy, and they are yelling at him, like, you know, and the chanting. And at a certain point, it gets crazy. There's just like 20 or 30 people, you know, go Nazi, go home, Nazi, go, or something like that. He's got no Nazi paraphernalia on him at all. He's got the Confederate flag, and we should draw a distinction between those things. It's pretty reasonable.
So he had both. He had a Confederate flag and a Nazi symbol.
No, he had no Nazi.
No Nazi symbol, just Nazi the Confederate flag.
No. Okay. And I always take points off when they have a gun, because I think that's just a bad idea. But like, I'm open to the idea that it's not a bad idea. But he had a gun, so I'm gonna say that's on him. But he was not doing anything. He was just saluting the statue of Robert E. Lee. Eventually, it zooms forward. A cop takes him away from the thing, and he agrees to go peacefully. And the cop asks him on feed, so what were you doing here today, son? And he said, I was honoring my ancestors. I wanted people to know that they weren't fighting for slavery and racism, which I happen to disagree with. I think that, you know, the Confederacy was inherently racist in its actions, and obviously fighting for slavery. So, but that's fine. That's his opinion. He's allowed to believe that and think that and say that.
Mm-hmm.
So then he gets in the car. The cop is going to escort him away, and someone comes up and says, "What are you doing?" And the person who's taping it. And he says, "I'm doing what you asked me to," the cop. So I assume that makes me infer that people asked the cop to remove him.
Mm-hmm.
So then, which is ridiculous, because he's not doing anything wrong, in my opinion.
Well, but isn't there
legally,
like a point? It's like a public safety thing where like the cop removes him for his own safety so he doesn't get trashed by the mob.
Yeah, that's sort of the implication.
Sort of a weak argument.
It's kind of a cutty video.
That's a slippery slope, but I think in that particular case, you could make a pretty strong argument in favor of the cop is just trying to protect the guy. But I don't know. I think I might have seen clips of this. Sounds familiar.
Yeah, and it was interesting. So he closed the door, and he's got this guy with the Confederate flag. He's got him in his in his car, and the woman says, "What are you leaving the park with a cop for? You're afraid to leave this park alone?" And the cop turns around and says, "You want another thing to happen, like happened on Saturday," referring to the car where the guy killed a person with his car, and I think injured other people too. But and then he said, "Shame on you." So then she said, "That incident is on your hands. That the blood is on your hands." Which, by the way, I also don't agree with. I don't think the cops knew that the guy was going to be crashing his car into people. I think they did everything they could to apprehend him, and they're pressing charges. So it's you know, like what do you expect the cops to do? Be clairvoyant? It's not fucking Minority Report with Tom Cruise and there's precogs. So I thought that was. But my point in saying that is that I'm sorry, I got on an awful tangent there. The point is that if you want an explanation for people sympathizing with Nazis and sympathizing with the alt-right, then your explanation is right there. It's people screaming at you. You know, any biases you have about leftists are just confirmed when you come and you come in force with weapons and you don't let them talk.
Yeah.
Like that like that's if you want to if there's like a 10% increase in Nazism, it's because they're not being given a platform. That's my answer to that. Is because they are being attacked, they are being and yeah, it's not like I don't sympathize with these people. I do sympathize with the desire to stop Nazism. I do. I don't think they're bad intentioned people. I really don't. I think they think that they're fighting racism and anti-Semitism and all kinds of awful things, and that's what they're doing. They just think that they have to battle in the streets for that. As soon as we allow our political destiny to be in the hands of people who think that violence is the answer, then I think we're descending into fascism itself. That's why I think Antifa is such a. I'm so skeptical. I'm so critical of them. To call yourselves anti-fascist, but to do the two things that are the most fascist in all of history, except for totalitarian government, which is shut down free speech and totalize the political spectrum, and attack people with violence who disagree with you. I can't think of things that are more fascist besides literally taking over the government and totalizing it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree with you. I like that argument, and I think there's a lot of truth to it. It's just a little scary, but I do really agree with maybe even lesser kind of microcosms of what we're talking about. The stuff that's like been happening at Berkeley, Milo and these other like Ann Coulter and all these, maybe not alt-right, but very far-right, controversial figures.
Milo is certainly alt-right, and
okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know where you draw the line of who stops.
I don't
and
know,
starts
but he
at
says it
alt-right.
himself, so that's
okay.
Close
Fine.
enough.
All right, he's alt-right, whatever. But these very far away from liberal folks, and it just does active damage to not allow them a platform to speak, especially in a university setting that's supposed to be about challenging ideas and kind of, at least in my mind, open-mindedness. That is the whole spirit of learning, is kind of being open-minded and trying to see the world from other people's perspectives. Isn't that the whole fucking reason why we read history? Isn't that like the whole reason why, we still teach people about the Civil War, so we can try to understand the perspective and, why we descended into those dark times, hopefully so that we can prevent ourselves from descending into similar dark times again. We can learn lessons from the mistakes made by our forefathers. Isn't that the whole fucking point? Isn't that why I spent 12 goddamn years in social studies learning about this bullshit?
Yeah, I think that's part of the point. Absolutely. I mean, you should certainly. That's why I'm in favor, as far as the statues go. I'm in favor of keeping them in some capacity. And if people want to have statues of Robert E. Lee on their fucking lawn in their house, have 6, have 10. I don't care. Like, it's your house. But it's not a place for public. But that's again, that's just my opinion, and I don't live in Charlottesville. I don't live in these places where they have Confederate monuments. They don't mean the same thing to me as they probably mean to people there.
It's a good preface, because
it's up to the city council and the voting populace. Vote. If you don't like the way they voted on it, then vote for new people the next time. Like, would you want, if someone disagreed with something that you did that you thought was peaceful and fine, would you want them using violence to stop you? It's not a good precedent to set. It's horrible.
Yeah. I wholeheartedly disagree with the vigilantism. I guess that's the word people are using for it. The idea we need to tear the monuments down ourselves. I think that is just, you're doing damage to your own cause. You're making yourself look like a fucking idiot, because you can't do that. You're making
yourself look like a criminal is what you're making.
Yeah, you simply do not have the right to do that. It's like, we live in a society. It was agreed upon that would be put up. You inherited that. There is a mechanism in which it can be changed through legal channels, and you just bypass that because you think you're fucking Neo from the Matrix. That's not how this whole thing works. So yeah, I have a big problem with that. I'm a little more middle of the fence than you are, though, with these monuments, because my parallel is, I think about church and state stuff. Well, I'm a pretty vocal atheist. I really don't like the idea of federal money having like the 10 Commandments on a church, on a courthouse, or any of that kind of stuff. I've read about some of those past cases. I think those are pretty clearly over the line. And the folks that use the argument that our country was founded on Christian morals, it's like, well, that's pretty true, but it was also founded on the idea that shit stays in private territory. So yeah, exactly. So I agree with that core argument, but I think the Confederate aspect is a little bit more complicated, and I think we can't completely write off the people that look at those statues as just like a memorial for lives lost. And I understand they were fighting for the losing side and what we consider the wrong side, the quote-unquote pro-slavery side, but it's still lives lost, right? It's still ancestors that died for a cause, and in retrospect, it wasn't the right cause. But I think you got to keep that time, the lens of time, in perspective with what those statues signify in terms of the people that say this is powerful to me. I think this should be here. I'm more of the mindset of, we shouldn't spend money on putting any more up, but the ones that are already up, it's kind of part of our history. I think we should. I don't think we should be ashamed of mistakes we made hundreds of years ago, in the sense of, we need to make this big kerfluffle about moving shit around and making sure it's in museums. Do I think do they belong in museums? Yes. Do I think it's worth the headache to move them and decommission them? And I don't think it's even a big enough issue to warrant the amount of dialogue we're having about it. I think the left side is exaggerating how quote unquote offensive these memorials are. I think they're more about memorials of lives lost than they are memorials to racism, personally. Mm-hmm. But again, I'm not on the side that feels that they're racist, and I'm also not in the camp that has ancestors that care about them. So I'm in this kind of weird perspective that it's hard for me to relate with either side truly. But
well, it's good though, because it makes you more likely to be unbiased, which I think you're probably, like we all are, you're riddled with biases, because everyone is, but you have less propensity to it because you don't have any particular camp that you're approaching from. So I like that. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't like the idea of retroactively trying to define how offensive something is. You know, a lot of these statues were up for a pretty long time, and it seemed like nobody really cared all that much. And now all of a sudden, it's this huge thing, and they have to be taken down. Or like, what happens if we don't take them down? I mean, seriously, like what?
Right.
What is the real argument? That it encourages like more? It reinforces this racist aspect of our society? I don't know that I buy that argument. That these statues or monuments are having that big of an influence on the.
See, I think they actually are quite important for different reasons than I think a lot of the left might think. And I think it's up to the state to establish which symbols are are viable and which ones they want to have represent the entire populace and which ones are not. And part of the criterion is definitely that the person who you're putting a statue up of is for like the United States of America and for the Union. That's an undercurrent that you almost never think about because you're usually putting up statues of Americans anyway.
Yeah.
But I think these guys definitely represent an exception because they were not that. They were rebels against the state, and it's very and symbols are very powerful. They have it's an incredibly powerful ideological war that you're fighting because you have these groups that are probably more prevalent in the South. Some of the neo-Nazi movements. I have no idea. I'll just make a guess. And you wanna fight the war on all fronts, the war of ideas on all fronts. And I think part of that is making sure that the public stance is as secular and as universal as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't think of anything more asecular than trying to destroy the secular government, which is what, in part the Confederacy was trying to achieve.
Yeah, but so how about this aspect, right? And this is something that I feel like is forgotten in modern politics on both sides. That as passionately as you feel about all of the ideals and morals that you hold true, there are people out there that feel equally powerful about ideas that are completely different in a way that's equally genuine, So it's, I guess I don't know the quite proper way to articulate this because I understand what you're saying. They were like rebels against they're treasonous, right? Rebels against our very nation. So why would we celebrate that? But we're rebels against Britain, and we celebrate that. From that aspect, it's a little bit subjective. And I just find it a little bit like I don't like the idea of kind of damning all of these people that fought for the South because their ideal wasn't, there's still some equal but opposite aspect there. That they were fighting, a lot of them were fighting for what they believed in, even if now I don't believe it was the right thing. I still respect that passion to go fight for what you believe in. Does that make sense? Is that a fucked up thing to say?
It's not a fucked up thing to say. Here's the thing. I think that here's what I sense here is that there's a level that you're talking about that you're saying people have all kinds of different beliefs, and here are your beliefs, and here are everyone else's, and it's not invalid that they have those beliefs.
And I'm also saying winners write the history, and I have trouble, I don't know how to feel about Robert E. Lee. I've read a couple little excerpts that who knows if they're actually sourced and true, the internet these days, right, that say, he had slaves, and he was going to let them go after 5 years and become citizens. I've heard other people say that he was a big-time racist, and, he was the driving force fighting for slavery. Mm-hmm. I don't really know what's true. I don't know if Robert E. Lee was a racist or if he was a reasonable dude, and he was on the losing side. So the winners write most of the history books. Of course, I'm sure he has journals or letters and all this stuff, and I'm not particularly well read on that particular, him as an individual, I'll admit. But that's just an aspect of this where it's hard for me to jump in that camp of, oh, dude, they were just treasonous assholes trying to overthrow the government. We should not celebrate them at all. I guess I don't know that that's 100% true, and maybe that's on me just to do more research. But
so, I mean, here's the thing. I think you could do as much research as you want, and you could find his particular views. You could do research on some of the founding fathers, and this is a really great counterpoint that people make about Thomas Jefferson. He has a statue on Mount Rushmore, and that's one of our most iconic symbols of all times is the Mount Rushmore symbol, and also Washington, and they had slaves. And not only that, if you do a little bit of research into Jefferson, he was notoriously bigoted. So there was this is a really interesting story. There was a mathematician, a black mathematician, a free man, in the North, who sent what's his name, Thomas Jefferson, a letter saying, I've heard some of your discourses about the inferiority and the inherent inferiority of blacks, and I wanted to present all of these these things that I've done on my own, these mathematical accomplishments that I've done on my own as a refutation of that. And I'd love to have a dialogue and a discourse with you to sort of talk about this. And this is kind of the relationship that eventually Frederick Douglass, and Lincoln had, this guy probably wanted to foster with earlier in our history with Thomas Jefferson.
Right.
And he sent back a cordial letter, and he said, this is fantastic. This is excellent work that you're doing. And then he said to his personal assistants, his friends, and things like that, this guy had to have gotten someone to do this for him. There's absolutely no way that a black person could have done these mathematical computations. It's impossible. And he had slaves, and he did the whole Sally Hemingway thing. He's wrought with controversy. He never rebelled against the Union, and that's, I know you don't know how you feel about that. So let me talk about that a little bit. When the Patriots rebelled against the Tories and the British, they made claims. The founding fathers made claims that Britain had no right to rule. They had little to no right to rule the colonies, and they made a huge. They tried to dispense a lot of literature about it, including Common Sense by Thomas Paine.
Mm-hmm.
Where he outlaid, like, they have a king, they have a monarchy, they don't believe the things that we believe. They're a million miles away. They're just using us. This and that and the other. So you could read that stuff if you want. It depends on how rightful you think that claim is. I think it's a rightful claim. I think it makes sense to secede from the British at that point. And I'm not inherently against wars of independence. I think some rulers are cruel, and they have, and it's obviously a fine line. But no one is condemning the slave revolts in Haiti, because in Haiti the Haitians gained their independence by fighting their slave masters, and it was a largely slave population who developed the new civil government in Haiti. 100 or 200 years ago, before our independence was even, I think, several hundred years ago.
Right.
And no one is saying, like, what's wrong with that? That they should have just stayed with the Union. So I think that because Robert E. Lee fought for the Confederacy, it means two things. It means that he was openly against the Union with little base, in my opinion. I don't think there was much basis to secede from the Union, especially since the main reason that he secedes, and this is for some reason controversial. I think people should look up, and I'd be happy to hear arguments about whether or not the Confederacy seceded over states' rights or over slavery. Whatever you boil it down to, it always comes to slavery, in my opinion, based on the literature I've read.
I think states' rights. I think it is definitely about slavery. Saying it's only about states' rights is definitely a falsehood, but I think states' rights is often left out of the conversation disproportionately. Is that fair?
No, I don't think it's fair, to be honest. No, I'd be happy to. It's just because I've read a lot about it, and I don't think that it's been disproportionately left out. I think the reason I say that is because almost every time the Confederacy and these soon to be Confederate states were talking about states' rights, it was always in relation to slavery.
Well,
it was always in relation to their right to have slavery.
Think about the logical flow. Slavery was the end point. It's like the mechanism in which they claimed was the only way they could be economically viable in the South, right? Wasn't that the core of the argument, that they needed slaves to harvest all the shit and work the fields, and without that labor, it wouldn't work.
That's turned out to be historically untrue.
I know that's not a true.
Because the slaves were freed, and I'm not
saying that's true. I'm saying that was like one of the arguments they used in terms of why the South needed slaves. Right? Am I right in that, or am I wrong?
Yeah, that's absolutely an argument.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you kind of backtrack that logical flow, it comes down to control. Who gets to make the rules? Is it the federal government, or do the states get to decide on? I think that is a fundamental aspect of slavery. Is the main thing they were fighting over. It was the manifestation of that argument of rights. But fundamentally, I think it still comes down to that decision-making power. Is it the federal government that oversees all the states that gets to decide, or is it individual states that have the right to choose?
That's
part of the discussion.
If that were true, then states like New York would have seceded long before South Carolina. Long before. Because New York has had, and I don't know if it still does, but at the time it had an extremely robust history of being wildly independent, and utilizing its states' rights to enact things that were anti-federal, let's say.
I mean,
and they didn't secede from the Union.
So, but New York didn't secede because they didn't want slaves, right? They were on that, and that's fine. I'm not saying that was the only reason the South wanted to secede. they use that as an excuse and just, you know, sort of said slavery is not really the big deal. I think that's a misnomer as well. Of course, slavery is a big part of it. I definitely believe there are a lot of racial overtones involved in that whole thing, and it isn't simply about states' rights. But I don't think you can say it's simply about slavery or it's 90% about slavery.
Okay.
I think it's a mixture of both. That's my only argument. That's my case.
The if there was no slavery, then there would not have been a war. That's the argument that I ultimately rest upon. It has nothing to do with states' rights. Was a platform. It was not about states' rights. Like that's my point. Like there were plenty of states that were exercising you know, a robust system of states' rights, and it wasn't that they were they felt, oh, the federal government is being disproportionate, and maybe they did feel that way, but it wasn't that the federal government was being disproportionate and unfair, into which things it allowed to be in the realms of the states and which things that it did not allow to be in the realms of the states.
But there was just
because they were allowing and disallowing lots of things at the time, lots of things. In fact, the Bill of Rights wasn't fully accepted by all the states for a long time. It took a decent amount of convincing to get the original colonies to sign up for the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights, which is a fundamental characteristic of our culture and our political economy.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I can't. It's the states' rights was a forum that the battle of slavery was fought on, but there was plenty of forums that the battle of slavery was fought on. There was economic forums, there was interpersonal forums, there was cultural forums. There's all kinds of things that weren't directly through that medium, but they all led back to the same thing. That's my point.
That's true. I definitely agree. It was the key piece. If you're looking at like kind of a spoken hub model, slavery's in the middle of it. Without slavery, the whole thing doesn't happen. I completely agree.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I like the nuance you bring to it, because maybe I need to do a little more research and.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's the thing, dude. This is a long fucking time ago. So undoubtedly, some of it is interpretation. Some of it is the variance in teachers and professors we've had that have talked to us about this shit, and some of it is in the variance of the different things that you and I have read individually, right? When you're reading about history, it depends on what source you're looking at, and it's a different kind of story, you know?
Yeah.
The lens of time, as we keep going back.
Okay, so let's get back then to what we were talking about. So I think that the way that because there's people falling asleep in the Twitch chat hilariously with their stupid little heads. That's pretty funny. But so I think that ultimately it's very hard to separate Confederacy, the Confederate movement from slavery. First of all. Second of all, it's very hard, it's impossible to separate it from seceding from the Union, and I would further stipulate seceding from the Union illegally and immorally. It was wrong for them to secede from the Union.
Yeah.
So I think that given that, these symbols are pretty clear, and I think that the state absolutely has the right. So by the state, I mean the government has absolutely the right to dictate which symbols are the most representative. So what I was talking about before is there's all these political issues. I'll call them political issues for now, because it's the easiest thing to call them. That I may have, and some people over here might disagree with, and some people might agree with, but they're all, like you said, they're all valid, and we can all talk about them. And then there are presuppositions to that, which I think we should have we should have as much conversation as we can about them, obviously, but they're held to a different ideal, and that's our fundamental rights, and one of them is free speech. It's the bedrock of our society, in my opinion. We would not have all of the things that we have without free speech. So this is I feel that free speech should be as free as possible. That's just a thing, and we limit it with great caution. So that's what I'm fighting for is in that. So, and I think that if you disagree with the individual politics, and the other thing is free speech, and also the right for the republic to survive, the right for our republic to survive without being attacked and without having Fort Sumter shelled, which is what the first battle was. The Confederates shelled Fort Sumter.
Yeah, sorry.
So those are preceding arguments to that thing that you're talking about. All these things that we disagree with. If we can't agree on the fact that the United States should survive, and we can't agree that we should all be allowed to say what we want to say and believe what we want to believe, then I think we really should change. We should that's all we should talk about, because I think that's so important that we talk about that.
No, we're pretty much on the same page, and I like the nuance that you put in there. It's a very, very beautiful way to put it. I believe in free speech and limiting it with, what was the word you used?
Extreme caution.
Extreme caution. Exactly. Because there are always extremes, and sometimes you do need to limit people that are, actually spreading hate speech and,
Yeah.
trying to,
Threats.
rally people for lynchings or what have you. But
exactly.
you have to be, it's not something that you can use willy-nilly because implications are serious. Once it becomes a slippery slope very quickly. So, but no, I agree with you, but I would ask, what would you say to someone who is, let's say from South Carolina and feels a bond to the Confederate flag, let's say has ancestors that were in relatives that were in the Civil War and fought for the South, who say the opposite of what you just said, that this Confederate flag hanging over my bed has nothing to do with slavery. It has to do with pride in the South. Like, would you just fundamentally say that person's wrong and ill-informed?
No, keep it over your bed.
Keep it over your bed.
If your Confederate flag is hanging over your bed, that's where it should stay. And if you want to put it in a museum, that's fine. I've already said that. I have no problem with that.
So it's just all about federal, public,
state, federal representation of symbols. You wouldn't put we'd have no argument about this about having a Nazi flag up. We defeated the Nazis in World War II. We didn't think what they were doing was right. We thought it was okay to invade their continent to defeat them, and we don't have their flag. I understand this is different because there are people who had Confederate ancestors. That's fine. But I might have, I'm not from, my ancestors are not, original Americans or whatever you want to call it. Well, I'm a third generation immigrant. So I might have ancestors who did all kinds of repugnant, fucked up shit against America. And I don't have their goddamn flags in public. And that's the difference. You can have Nazi flags in your home. You can have, that's fine. If that's what you want, whatever. You're allowed to do that. Exactly. But don't expect us to sponsor that through state symbolism. That's very important. And the reason I think that's so important is because the state and all large entities, all entities communicate with symbolism. And symbolism is very powerful. It shapes the way we think. And it also, when we put up role models, people we idolize, that in part, when they're sponsored by the government and put in public, that is creating a space where it's okay to look up to guys who seceded from the Union. No, the government does not sponsor that. The government does not sponsor such behavior. So it should not be in a government public zone. That is how I feel about that. And again, I'll zoom a little bit back. That is this level of my feeling. It's more up to the localities. I think that is what precedes that. I think those people are what decide it ultimately. Right. But if I had my way, I would not. We would not have stuff like
so
that. So
you're saying if a community were to vote and the community was in favor of putting up keeping the Confederate statue, you wouldn't have an issue with it if it was a democratic
I guess
decision.
Not. The more I talk about it, the more I feel like I'm hardlining myself though, because I don't even know if it's I don't even know if it's a good idea to have those kinds of symbols. Would you? Okay, so just to make this a little bit more easy to understand, would you be okay with a community in Florida, let's say a city, voting to raise a Nazi flag in public, like right under the American flag?
So that's so weird, because for that to happen, you would need a quorum and a majority of that voting base to vote pass on hanging up a Nazi flag.
Let's assume it happens.
So exactly, but just setting the stage for that to become a truth, that is such a weird situation of, I was talking about neo-Nazis growing. That's growth on an exponential scale. So if we're at that point, there is some serious shit going down. So I feel like my perspective on it would be a little bit different. But I think I
think you'd be surprised how little it would take to do that.
You think so?
Yeah.
Well, so that's where I see. To me personally,
depending on the size of the city, but
that's true. It depends on the size of the city. But for me personally, that's where it starts becoming guys, where is the line? I don't know who gets to decide where the line is, but at what point is
Why there? Why is it more questionable when it's the National Socialist Party of Germany versus the Confederates?
Well, I think one is pretty indistinguishably committed worse atrocities than the other. Well, I mean, I don't think you can blame all of the Confederacy for all of the atrocities with slave labor, but
nor could you blame all of the infrastructure of Germany or their empire, because there's plenty of people who hid Jews who were German citizens.
Okay. I guess what I would say is I'd have to think about it. It's a really lame answer, but that's a really...
No, it's fine. I think it's a good answer.
That's a weird one I haven't really thought about that much. I really think my perspective might be different if there was that big of a concentration. I think it starts to... I don't know, dude. That's what scares me about the whole movement. Like you said, I agree with the general argument and the logical flow of the free speech, in that if it's really just hate, it'll never catch on because there will be all these people that are, it won't be able to get fired because there's no real substance there once you break it down and get past the visceral, emotional, we're going to get them, Once that dies down, there's no substance behind it. I get that, and I generally agree, but if flags are being drawn up below the American flag, I think that assessment is no longer true, where it is growing and that free platform is starting to, so think about like the beginning of the Hitler movement. At the beginning, we're having this same conversation. It's just free speech. He's allowed to go into bars or wherever else and rile people up and talk about, whoever they're scapegoating. It starts as free speech, and it's a gray scale of when that free speech becomes a clear, okay, we need to fucking stop this guy because he's talking about seriously violent stuff. And I guess what I'm saying is it's hard to determine where that line is when it's happening in live time. You look back in history, you could probably find like a month gap there or something where Hitler went from just talk to actual violence. You know what I mean? You could probably look in hindsight and find that window. Doing it when it's happening now, like, is this the window? Is it tomorrow? Is it the next day? That's really hard to define in the moment. But there could come a point where that has to be defined, I mean, isn't there a foreseeable reality where if neo-Nazi numbers grow enough that they will revolt and try to take over? They're not doing it now because they won't win, but if they had enough ammunition, do you think they might try? That's where my brain would start to go if I were to see a flag hung up proudly in a public space below an American. But I don't know. That would be crazy. I don't know how I would feel and once that happened.
What is the difference though? So what does the Confederate flag represent that's worth sponsoring a state? This is why I think I fundamentally disagree with the flag being put in a public space, is because I've said this before, but it's the government endorsing ideas, a set of ideas, and it's not so much what it endorses, but what it doesn't endorse. That's what I think is very important.
I think
it does not endorse seceding. It does not endorse slavery, and these are things that are endemic of the Confederate flag.
Okay.
And you can make some arguments that it's also about Southern pride. I'm not saying that the Confederate flag is not about Southern pride. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you can't say it's just about Southern pride.
Okay.
Okay.
No.
That's just ridiculous to me. Like it's clearly about more than that.
That's fair. I think where we're getting hung up is my attitude with the statues is I wouldn't put new ones up. I think it's all like I'm of this mindset of there's sort of like we need to be looking at the future and not dwell on things that happened in the past. Like those statues are already up. If people want to vote and relocate them to museums, that's great. If they don't, I think that they're already there. Like they were put up in a time when what you just said was not as clear and straightforward, perhaps. So I think that's part of the mindset of when they were erected. And it might be ill-guided, but that's something in the past.
Well, that's an interesting point, because the reason that those statues were erected, I think, and this is an inference, this is a historical inference, is that I happen to know that the antebellum period and the periods after the Civil War just ended, the South had a lot of jurisdiction over the kinds of laws that it could make and the kinds of things that it could do. So there was the lynching era after that lasted until the 1920s, in which 5,000 African American black people were killed in lynchings. And they didn't just happen in the South, by the way. They also happened in the North, which is surprising to some people, but it's true. They happened all over the country. But there was a lot of them in the South, and part of the reason was because they had a lot of leeway legally and politically and culturally to do the things that they wanted to do, because it was just hard to stop them because there's more people who agreed with you. So one of the reasons I think it was probably very easy to put those statues up was because it was easier to do all things. It was easier to do anything that wouldn't be endorsed by the federal government. But now we've progressed to a point, and so I mean, like let's say that someone, I know people put up these statues. It's wrong for them to be up. Like it's not. If you can agree that you shouldn't put any more up in a public space, then I agree. Here's a good thing that I think you can tie it to, since you mentioned it before: atheism and secularism, and the secularism in particular. The ideal of the Republic, in my opinion, is a secular ideal. It's separating religions so that you don't favor any group over another one, and you don't sponsor any ideas that you don't want the whole populace to wholesale buy into. Like If they do, that's fine, but they do it on their own time.
No, I see what you're saying. If I apply
So
the
shouldn't
same,
we take the Bible away from?
Yeah,
Like, should you have to swear on a Bible? Shouldn't you be given the option to swear on a
I see what you're
Constitution?
saying.
Shouldn't
If
you
I
think
apply
God
the
be
same
trusted?
argument to the Ten Commandment thing, well, like, dude, those were there when they built the church. It was part of the history, and now I'm arguing that we should remove it because it shouldn't be there. It's the exact same fucking thing. Just one's religion, and I care about that more, and the other one is Confederate statues, and
it's hard to know where they're at. So
and
it's
I you know, it's
Southern
not one I'm
pride, all that
passionate
stuff.
about. I'm not from the South. I don't have family in the South.
Yep.
You know, I don't have any African American folks in my family that are, you know, feel like they're racist symbols. I'm very neutral in terms of my personal involvement. So you're right. Maybe that's just my bias. In terms of argument, I think it's actually the same thing. So maybe you've caught me in a lie here, Dylan. Maybe you've bested me, my friend.
Yeah, it's good that you mentioned that, though, because I think people will always make political decisions based on proximity. And what I mean by that is that they'll always make decisions that they care about.
Yeah.
They'll talk about issues that they care about. And you care more about separation of church and state because you're an atheist and because it's more important to you. So I think that's fine. But I think fundamentally, if someone revolted against the United States government, I'm not in favor of that anywhere. I don't want anyone to think that's an okay thing to do. You know, if they did in Ohio or Florida or California, I don't care where it is. And if they put up statues of ideologues who are mainstay fighters in that,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be okay with that. And I'm not okay. And I think I'm glad we talked because I like to hear your perspective, and I'm glad we disagree on certain things or, you know, brought up different points. But I feel more strongly now about this now that we've talked about it. I don't think it's okay to put up symbols that endorse secession and violence and slavery. If you can help it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I need to digest a little bit as well and think about it. It is hard to empathize with. So, there's still just a part of me that even though I can't quite explain it logically, I don't like the idea of just removing things from public space that until very recently have kind of just been there and not really gotten much attention or what have you. But
it's dangerous. It's weird because even if you wanted to get rid of the stuff that was religious in our,
it feels like
it would be very difficult to do.
But it's not. You know, it's not really.
It is. No, you're right.
Well,
it is censorship, but the state has the right to censor some things.
Yeah, it's censorship in the context of the separation we're kind of talking about. So it's a weird, complicated issue. And I think part of the reason probably why I feel like, you know what, the ones that are there, let's just leave them alone unless people actually vote to get rid of them, because the other side has destroyed so many of them. I'm just like, you know what? I'm a little emotional now. Fuck you guys. Like, that's so far over the line that now you deserve to have some of these up in your public space because you fucked it up. You can't just go spray paint douchebag on, like, memorials and graves. That's fucked up, dude. Like, that is actually, like...
I have wholesale... I have no sympathy for people who destroy the statues. I have no sympathy for people who deface them. I think that's... Again, anytime you commit a crime, it's very important to realize this. Anytime you commit a crime in the desires of bringing out a political end of some kind, you open up the door for others to do that. You make it like, well, they did it, so why wouldn't we do it? You know, we need to play on level. That's the whole Antifa argument, and it's a stupid argument, I think. Is that
eye for an eye, right?
It's sort of like an eye for an eye. It's level playing field. It's kind of more like balance of power. Politics. So like and one of Antifa's argument is that, well, they come in force, so we should come in force. And it's like, well. And then what if the neo-Nazis see that and they're like, oh, well, they came in force, we should come in more force. And then Antifa sees that, and what do they think? It's just a spiraling ridiculousness. It's not okay. Like, it's not okay to do wrong things because other people are doing wrong things. And if neo-Nazis tore down a statue of, fucking, Maya Angelou or something like that, or, like a beautiful poet and left-wing ideologue who we all respect, who more or less we should all look to. And, I don't think she's politically charged enough to not be a federal symbol. But let's just say they went to a museum and they set her fucking statue on fire. Would you think that that's okay?
Right.
Because that's what you're saying when you go and graffiti and tear down statues and destroy public monuments. You're saying it's okay sometimes to use crime to put further your political ends. And then if you say it's not okay for them to do it, then you're a fucking hypocrite and you're a fucking fascist, man. Like I'm sorry, like you're not anything short of that. Like if you say it's okay for you to use violence and just you because you believe it and not them, what are you talking about? Like you're wholesale hypocrisy.
No, I 100% agree with you. And that's it tickles that part of my brain that has mixed feeling about riots, because there is no doubt that like that kind of rioting and like really extreme outburst when crazy stuff happens has changed history. You know, I mean, it like happened. It's happened all throughout the course of time. Sometimes violent protest is a way to start a revolution. Okay, there's no denying that, but that doesn't mean that every riot is actually doing that, and that aspects of rioting aren't just people fucking throwing rocks in store buildings and taking everything.
Right, and it's funny because when people draw that parallel, it's very interesting to me because I think it's fascinating, and it's not a bad argument because it is partly true. So you think about like the Boston Massacre was like this, where 5 people died. It wasn't a massacre, but that's how we know it. And it was 5 colonists who, U.S. like not U.S. but American colonists under British rule who were killed by musketeers, British infantrymen, and they were killed because some kind of riot had started. Crispus Attucks, or I think is the man who started the confrontation, something like that, and everyone sympathized with that. Like the Americans sympathized with that, and it sparked a revolution. But like if you look at it, I mean, in a lot of ways, it wasn't the British's fault. It was not their fault at all, really. It partly was because they were perpetuating, let's say, a really what's the word? Bad, regime. There's a better word than bad, but totalitarian regime.
Yeah.
And so then, that's bad. They shouldn't endorse that. But I think the people who threw the first strike were the colonists. Zoom forward. Not every single revolutionary attack against the British was some mob attacking the British in the streets, and throwing torches and burning buildings. And it was not that. It was the Battle of Lexington and Concord. It was when they all got together and they made the first Continental Congress, and they decided, okay, we're going to try and legitimize this. We all feel this way, or a lot of us feel. It wasn't even all of them. There was like 30% of the Americans were, or 40% were loyalists, loyalist Tories. So it's not even all of them, but enough of them felt that way that they were like, no, we can't have this. We can't stand for this. What do? Well, we don't go into the street and start burning down all of our homes. We get together and we form a real military, and we try and fight this in a real way. Yeah. And I think that is a revolutionary aspect. That's what differentiates a rebellion from a revolution.
Okay. No, I like that distinction.
Because they're revolving. They're actually changing. They changed from a monarchy into a democratic republic.
So is all of that to say that what I had just stated about rioting and sometimes being the spark for revolution, you're saying that's not really true? A rebellion and a revolution are different?
They're different,
okay.
And it's also so. I don't think
it's a good distinction.
It's not fair for me to say that any little rebellion here or there, or any little riot here or there, is just a wholesale bad thing. That's just a dumb. I think that's a very like simplistic, moral way to look at it. It's reductionist. Thank you. It's extremely reductionist. So I think it's probably wiser to look at each event in context of its merits. Most events that are revolutionary, though, I think you'll find if you and I don't know this for fact, but I think if someone were to go and do their revolutionary history, it would be because an actual revolution, really.
Okay.
It's because they organized. They decide there's a couple things we all agree on. That's the Bill of Rights. That's the Constitution for the United States. That's what we did. And then they were like, okay, we're going to fight this in a unified way. We're a populace now. We're a people now. We have laws now. They immediately went to law and government. They went to law and order. They did not just do riots in the streets and things like that.
Right.
I mean? Not saying that those things can't be important in the history of revolution, because they are. Undoubtedly, the Boston Massacre was very eye-opening for a lot of colonists at the time. Undoubtedly, but it's not the only mechanism, and it's hardly the only mechanism. It's if it's a spark point, whatever, it's a spark point, but.
No,
that's not how you fight.
No, I think it's an interesting perspective to think about, and I think that helps contextualize the gist of what I was poorly articulating. That sort of well, it's like a weird paradox. It's like you don't want to condone violence and kind of violent protest, but at the same time, you can't completely write it off and say that every single form of violent protest is unwarranted or not serving a greater good, a year or whatever down the road. So it's just it just speaks to the complexity of the human condition, man. And that's what makes me so fucking mad about watching CNN or MSNBC or anything else in the main, even just reading fucking people arguing on George Takei's posts on Facebook, is that everybody has boiled down the current state of affairs in the world to these weird binary for or against. You're pro-life or you're pro-killing fucking babies. You're either pro-war or you're pro-letting ISIS take over the world. It's these crazy extremes where it seems like most people have forgotten that all of it is a gray. And all of the answers are some form of compromise in the middle with a give and take that, you know, is evaluated over time. It feels like to me a lot of the rational people that understand that have just fucking checked out of politics and tried to make it in the private sector. And it's a goddamn shame. You know, it's just that frustrates me more than, you know, some of the topical things you actually hear people say. That there's no real follow-up discussion about it. That people who don't use the internet regularly or consume this kind of content or Joe Rogan content, these long, unedited, free-form conversations where you can really get into those nuances. I feel bad for people that just read headlines, the New York Times or CNN or MSNBC and these folks. That's the only feed they get. And no matter where you are, it's either headline panic mania garbage from CNN, liberal one-sided anti-Trump bullshit from MSNBC, or super right-wing conservative nonsense from Fox News. There is no good middle ground. It's like Jon Stewart used to say when he was arguing with the Crossfire guys. Oh, we have debate. No, I would love to see a debate. Somebody give me a fucking debate.
Yeah, please. I remember that was an iconic interview.
Like, for the love of God, somebody go on TV and have even the presidential debate. They're bullshit. It's just two people talking at each other. They're not allowed to interrupt each other or stop them when they. It's just two people spewing marketing nonsense. Nobody ever has a real fucking thought anymore, except Joe Rogan, and that's why his podcast is growing like fucking crazy.
Yeah,
and, like, honestly,
it's very frustrating.
Sorry, I know I just went on for a while, but like. We talked about Alex Jones a little bit yesterday, and we were kind of fucking around. But, like, I think what I just described is partially why he has such a hardcore fan base. Because even though they're conspiracy theorists and they're crazy and they use all these psychological marketing techniques to get people, like the clickbait titles and all that kind of stuff, they do all of that very well, but at least they have long-form, unedited conversations. They're one-sided. They're often biased. They're often about topics that are fucking batshit. But it tickles that aspect of what people don't get from mainstream media, where they're tired of these fake, phony, makeup-ridden people. They don't even look like humans. They don't talk like humans. They talk like a fucking robot reading a teleprompter. And at least Alex Jones is a fucking person. At least he speaks with some fucking conviction and believes the bullshit that he's saying. And people are hungry for that. People are hungry for some real goddamn journalism and discussion. We live in the most complicated time in history. And for some reason, the conversation seems to have muddled down to this binary. I like cats. I have access to the whole fucking world on this goddamn cell phone. And all we do is mess around on Facebook. Like, it's just, what is it, Dylan? Sorry, I had to get that out.
It's so fun. No, I think you're so right. And I think one of the reasons people, you said people are forgetting they're forgetting like that the world is full of gray. And I like thinking of that as the world is full of situations that you have to analyze. And the better you analyze them, the more diligence you utilize, then within reasonable time constraints, then the better your decisions will be. And the reason I think people have lost that a little bit is the ability to analyze and sort of see things in a gray sense instead of a black and white sense is because we don't talk to each other anymore. It's as simple as that. And people on the left don't talk to people on the right. People on the right don't. And one of the reasons is because they're afraid. You know, both groups have good reasons to be afraid of the other side because you know, and if nothing else, the average person doesn't want to bring up their political beliefs because they know that they're going to be vilified for it. Yeah. And that is because we have failed so far, and we are failing, and we should try and do better about
bad at listening.
Bad at listening. We're very bad at listening, and we're very bad at talking to each other. We're very bad at it. You know, I think in some senses I'm given hope by Joe Rogan and by other like authentic even by Alex Jones and Milo and you know and Sam Harris and all people from all kinds of political spectrums. I'm given hope by them because they're so good at it. They're great listeners and they are authentic. You know. And they don't just have like a bunch of tactics, guttural responses when they hear, I believe that, you know, we should build a wall, or I believe that we should just ban the military, which is another thing I've heard recently, or oh, you should do this or that. Like they don't just say, oh, you're a racist, oh, you're a fucking Nazi, oh, you're a fucking communist, you're an anarchist leftist idiot. Like like why is our first response when someone says something that we don't understand to insult that person?
I don't know.
I don't know. I think it's such a bad, and I think so. This is why this is the only political issue I care about now is free speech. This is why all this stuff down there, I use this hand gesture very deliberately because this stuff is like in the ether right now for me. I don't care about it. Like I care about it, of course, and we talked about some stuff like this. Should we keep the flag up? Should we not? Should we take the statue down? Should we not? That's on this level, I think, in a very large sense. But free speech precedes all of that. We can't discuss any of that stuff unless we know how to interchange our ideas. Mm-hmm. And I would not be the person I am today if I didn't take the time to expose myself to people I absolutely disagree with. And that's why I'm in favor of going up to Nazis, going up to alt-right people, going up to anarchists and Antifa and asking them what they believe and why, and just listening to them. Mm-hmm. Because you cannot make people who don't want to listen. If they don't want to listen, they're not going to listen.
Yep.
But you can show them how to listen. Dude, and that is the absolute best way to get people on the right track, in my opinion, is to
preach
just
it, brother.
Soak it in.
Dude, I have a short anecdote, very simple, like that just exemplifies what you just said. Family friend, we were at a holiday gathering. One family member conservative, everyone else liberal, right? The one guy in the family that voted for Trump, and they said like, oh no, you don't bring up politics because all this kind of stuff. I'm just like, dude, that's the one guy I want to talk to politics.
Yes.
And they were just like, oh, well, he's not going to agree with anything you have to say. And I said, I don't want to fucking say a word. I want to listen. I want to understand why he's the one person in this room that disagrees with everybody else. And as I started talking to everyone, everyone thought that he had this hard line on abortion. And once I started talking to him, I said, I can understand if you don't agree with it, you think it's immoral, that's fine. But you have to understand that stops with you. And other people have choices in different circumstances that you don't always understand, and you have to give them a legal, viable way to do this. Because if you don't, they're just going to do it illegally. And then you have a whole black market for doctors without medical licenses. You have more people having unwanted pregnancies, people growing up without parents. It does a disservice to the nation to not have some legal way for people to do this. And we can argue about the nuances of trimesters and all this stuff, but we have to agree that there is some level of choice because we live in a free society. And he basically agreed with me. He said, yeah, I wouldn't get an abortion, but that makes sense. It's hard to disagree with that argument. And everyone was like, holy shit, I didn't know you felt that way about abortion. And I just wanted to say, like, that's because all y'all stopped listening a while ago. And, like, it's really powerful when you just sit down and listen to somebody and, like, have an open mind when you hear about their way of thinking. And a lot of times you'll learn perspective is pretty fucking subjective. Sometimes you'll learn that somebody's racist because when they were a kid, they were robbed at gunpoint by somebody of that ethnicity. That's not an emotional reaction. It's a rational, emotional reaction to a trauma that happened to them, right? And that's something that you can understand and work through, but you can only get there if you listen and learn that in the first place.
That's so true. That's absolutely. I love that example. I think it's an absolutely exemplary example. Because you won't, we have to decide if we want to humanize each other, if we want to respect each other, or if we want to fear each other. Because that's what we do when we don't talk to each other. And that's actually a very real psychological response. Whenever you're afraid of something, if you're trying to get over your fears, psychologists will advise you to just very what's it called? Not ironically, they'll encourage you to face your fears.
Yeah.
Because the longer and longer that you avoid that, the harder and harder it is for you to grapple it, and it becomes more in this like unknown space, and you get very uncomfortable. It's very easy to get uncomfortable. So the longer we wait, the worse it gets. Is the point. And I think the best way to understand each other is to talk to each other and shrink that fear, because we'll inevitably shrink that fear. You realize that the person you're talking to is a person. They have a human identity, and they have a reason to believe the things that they do. They have a history which has shaped them, and given them, like you said, with the gun example, it's just it gives you all the more reason to sympathize with them and empathize with them, which is how you create the absolute cornerstone to American success, in my opinion, or at least one of the cornerstones, which is compromise. Mm-hmm. Compromise is one of the old dead forms of success, and it's not dead because it's underplayed in the media how big it is. Still, it's still huge. But back in the day, Henry Clay, famous founding father, was called the Great Compromiser, and he was renowned for all these huge, like way more, I think, in my opinion, way more charged arguments going on at the time of Henry Clay's life than right now. Because we're arguing about like statues and things like that and symbols, which are important, of course, but they're not as important as slavery and things like that.
Like fundamental human rights stuff. Yeah, it's very different.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
so
very
it's stuff that people feel extreme. Like you have abolitionists, hardline abolitionists who think slavery is the most debased, evil thing in the world, and then you have people who have like family slaves, and their slaves are like they're closer to their slaves than they are to their neighbors. So you have people on both sides. And it's like, I'm not going to get rid of my slaves. They're my family. And they're also like, making me a shitload of money, I'm sure is like, part of the argument there, whether it's implicit or explicit. And then there's abolitionists who are like, no, it's always wrong. It's always wrong. And then you got these guys in the middle, the Henry Clays of the world, who are, encouraging the whole populace to listen to each other. And it created some of the most incredible pieces of legislation you could ever imagine in your life, because people just sat down and they didn't get what they wanted. Politics isn't about getting what you, it's about getting what you want as close as you can. And it's better in a republic if people are pretty much pissed off or mildly happy than very happy. Because if they're very happy, that means someone really didn't get their way. And if everyone's if you'd rather have 90% of the populace kind of pissed off than have like 30% of the populace really happy.
That's an interesting way to look at it, but I don't think I can disagree. Dylan, we need to start wrapping this thing up, man. We're getting close to the 2-hour mark, so it's about time to put her in the parking lot. But man, this did not disappoint. I feel like my brain is just going a mile a minute now, kind of trying to digest all the stuff we talked about. Is there any closing words, any kind of final assessments here you want to throw out to bring her home?
This was absolutely fantastic. I really appreciate you having me on. Anytime you want to have discussions like this, that I'm more than open. Thanks for the webcam, by the way. If any of you don't know, the only reason that my image right now is better than it would be is because Zyori sent me $40 to help me pay for this webcam. So thanks for that. And I want to thank everybody in the Twitch feed. I know I said that we were going to talk a little bit more to you guys, and we didn't really. But I was watching your comments, and as always, I really appreciate the dialogue that you guys are having, and that you're willing to talk to each other on some level about very charged issues is awesome. And I hopefully we get to talk to you more deliberately in the future.
Absolutely, man. It's always a pleasure, and I love being able to talk to someone about these hard issues because I try to stay up to date some, but I'm not a big history guy. I've always been like more of a math science type. When I was in school, I didn't gravitate towards history, and I know who Henry Clay is. I know like the gist of these historical figures you're talking about, but you understand the historical context a lot better than I can, and it's really great to be able to chat with someone who can use these real historical pieces of evidence and like give us the context to apply it to modern day logic and policy, and just it helps tell the story of how we got here. There's a reason why America isn't perfect in a lot of different ways. It's because it's a fucking organism, dude. We're an ecosystem, and it's just growing. We have this foundation, and it was pretty good, but it's all unprecedented, dude. None of this shit's ever happened before. Yeah,
I agree. You're so right about that. That's a good. I didn't really think of it until you just said it, but that is a very good way to think of it. It's not been done to this extent. I mean, it has, of course. That's not really true, but we've done some things.
I just mean with this time of cryptocurrencies and all of this different technology that we have access to, and cyber crimes and nuclear power and all. I mean, it's just crazy. All this kind of stuff. The whole concept of cryptocurrency is decentralization, taking power away from banks and the Federal Reserve and all of these.
I've never even heard of it.
Bitcoin.
I know it. I've heard of Bitcoin. I'll if you're gonna be a good guy and admit that you're ignorant to some history things, I'll tell you I'm pretty ignorant to Bitcoin. I have no idea what the fuck it is.
Okay, all right. Well, that's a whole nother fucking podcast. But yeah, I'll digress. But technologies like that are very foreboding for the next century, half century of governments and these big power structures we have. That kind of the analogy that I read the other day is that Bitcoin will do to banks what what email did to regular mail. Interesting analogy.
That's pretty crazy. Okay.
But digest that one a little bit, and we'll talk about it later.
Okay, so can I propose something?
Sure, man, do it up.
So we talked a little bit about this will be my closer, and then we can go. But we talked a little bit about neo-Nazis and the rise of neo-Nazis and whether or not what we're doing right now is contributing to that or it's not, and what we should do about that.
Mhm.
So I really, and I also mentioned that I really want to involve people in the Twitch chat. So for anybody who's listening and anybody who's interested, I would urge you all to look up an old event called the Battle of Cable. Let me just make sure I've got the wording right. It's called the Battle of Cable Street in 1936. It's called the Battle of Cable Street, and it's a battle between Antifa, which is an old organization. If anybody didn't know that, it's as old as fascism, and anti-fascist forces and fascists. And my initial, I haven't looked up too much about it, but I'm going to. We should look it up together, and then we should talk about it. I think that would be a great thing. So if we're going to talk about something in the future, and I'm sure the news will provide you and me, Andrew, with all kinds of shit that we want to talk about.
Yeah.
But if we want to talk about something with the Twitch chat in particular, maybe we can talk about whatever they want to talk about if they propose anything to you. But if we have nothing, then maybe the Battle of Cable.
Okay. I linked the Wikipedia and Twitch chat, so they should be able to find it.
Cool. Battle of Cable, sweet. And then so I mean that's my initial premise is going to be that, and I would like for people to prove me wrong or to talk about it and whatever, but is that the Battle of Cable Street probably made Nazism worse for all of the world rather than better. And that was a battle. That was a fight that happened between anti-fascist forces and fascist forces. I'll stay right here and I'll just say it without even fucking looking it up. I'm going to guess that it made fascism worse, not better. And maybe we can apply that to
and
our
by
modern
worse,
context.
you mean that event allowed fascism to spread and take a deeper hold.
Sorry, yeah, you're right. My language is a little unclear. It allowed fascism to spread more quickly and more powerfully than if it did not happen.
It did not help the anti-fascism cause.
No, it hurt it.
Okay.
It was a gift to the fascists.
Yeah, so someone asking when will be the next podcast? Who knows? I'd love to do a three-way and have Trent on with Dylan one of these days and cross-pollinate a little bit just to mix in the Canadian perspective. Of course, Trent couldn't make it today. He is traveling. He's headed over to Germany. He's going to be doing some content over there. So hopefully I didn't just spoil something. But yeah, he's away for the next week or so. So Dylan, man, again, it's always a pleasure. I like in true philosophy major fashion, leaving the Twitch chat with a little bit of homework, a little research on their own. I like that, dude. That's good. Humanizing the Twitch chat, man.
They're humans, so yeah, definitely easy to do.
Folks, if you joined us late, you can find this VOD on the Moonduck YouTube, youtube.com/moonducktv. The next one probably going to be in 2 weeks. We try to do Zyori podcast every other Sunday, kind of plus or minus a day or two. So that's our general schedule. Just stay tuned to the social media, both Moonduck TV and Zyori TV on Twitter. And you'll get those updates when we're coming about. Dylan doesn't have a Twitter, but he's Dylan 2sec on Twitch chat. So if you ever see him,
and you can get my email. I can send my email out. I can put that in the chat. It's DLN and then my last name. DLN 2sec at Gmail. Huh?
If you dare give him your email, go for it.
I dare.
All right.
I dare. I like talking to people. So
very good. All right, folks. So that's it. We'll see you next time. Thank you very much for joining us
having me, man.
On this crazy journey, Dylan. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, man. Thank you.